Welcome to the Business Excellence for Managers podcast, which is dedicated for all of you leaders and executives who would like to continuously improve your business performance. This podcast is sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, the online training company that cares about your development, your employees' development, and your business performance. You can find the courses under www.wave-bef.com. In today's episode, we're going to speak about what emotional intelligence means and how it can make you even a better leader. In many organizations, this is not even seen as a quality of a leader. Today, some companies incorporate the factor emotional intelligence into their hiring process. If I look back on my career development, this was probably one of the key drivers that helped me go up the corporate ladder so quickly, even though I was the youngest person and the one with the least experience at that time. In this episode, my special guest speaks about how working on your emotional intelligence can make you understand your team members better and how you can further motivate them to enjoy their work and continue to deliver higher results. Lastly, we will speak about how you can work this muscle and continuously get better at it. I'm proud to introduce you to an expert on the topic emotional intelligence. Her name is Diana Lowe, and she currently lives in Phoenix, Arizona. She is the CEO of Blue Light Leadership, which is a leadership development company focused on educating, training, and coaching emotional intelligence for remote leaders. Diana is an executive coach who works with directors to C-suite executives in Fortune 500 companies to transform their team spirit and communication, resulting in turning low-performing teams into high-productive and engaged teams. Her company focuses on using evidence-based research from positive psychology to combat rising stress and anxiety so you as a leader can thrive in navigating uncertainty. I'm thrilled to introduce you to this amazing guest, Diana Lowe. Hello, Diana, and welcome to the Business Excellence for Managers podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. Can't wait for our conversation.
Well, thanks so much for your time. And I've been looking at your trajectory of everything that you have done so far, and it's just so amazing. And that's why one of my first questions for you is, how did you find your passion and how did you get to where you are today?
Oh, this is a good question because I think a lot of people have this yearning of what they want to do for their life. The way I like to think of it in a metaphor is that throughout my 20s to my 30s to my late 30s and early 40s even, it was like picking up a piece of a puzzle, but I wasn't really sure quite what the picture was yet. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be or what I quite liked. So a lot of it was experimenting. However, as you and I have talked about a lot, one thing that was consistent in my career is having bad bosses, having abusive workplaces, toxic workplaces. And as I recovered from those situations, I found that this was my mission, to have it back to back to back. And I think even you and I talked about, like I said, when I was in my recovery of dealing with psychological abuse at work, toxic bosses, and the whole gamut, I'd like to say I came out of recovery and everything was better, but it wasn't better because it's a process, right? So for me, it finally made sense when I learned about social and emotional intelligence. I was like, that's what our leaders are missing. So this has been my mission to bring this to leaders in this generation so we don't have toxic workplaces, so we don't have abusive situations. So that's, for me, it's been quite a journey. And I think I want to say it took like 15 to 18 years to really feel like, oh, I know what I'm doing here in this life and for this reason. So yeah.
Wow. That is really very important for people to know that only in that scenario, by having those skills as a manager, you can actually have more of a win-win because you are treating your employees well. And at the same time, now as the employees are feeling better, they're more happy to come to work. They can produce better outputs and services and products for the customers. So it's really like a cycle that is strengthening itself. And if you do then the opposite, if you're not using tools for understanding your employees and feeling what they're feeling and just the opposite of emotional intelligence, intelligence and thinking that you are this, I would say, the old school managers, that you have to pressure people to get more out of them.
Yeah.
And that's something that just does not work.
It's not going to work, especially moving forward in our younger generations, because our younger generations, they're going to come into the workplace already having forms of income. They're not going to necessarily need, hey, I need to work on this. They're going to want social impact. They're going to want some sort of justice. They're going to want so many things that are different from the previous generations. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but that definitely requires us to listen to people, to understand their point of view, even if we don't agree. And that's going to be a stretch for some people, you know, and a stretch for how we promote people and how we move our businesses forward.
So true. And that's something I just realized right now while you were mentioning that if I look really at the past, those generations where they were all happy to have a job and they're just saying, okay, now that I have a job, I'm going to hang on to it with all I've got. Yeah, no matter if you are not being treated nicely by your manager or from your colleagues, no matter if your company is doing something bad for the environment, for our planet. They say, main thing, I have a job and I can feed my family. So that was like their main priority. But as you said, today, people are really more aware of, what am I doing? Are my actions contributing to something good? Is my work in this company doing something good for our society, for the people, for the planet, for the environment, or for any other things that that company is producing as a service or as a product? And how is my relationship with my manager? And if I looked at the statistics, what is it that is keeping an employee with a company? And it's not salary. Salary was somewhere like, I think, somewhere, I don't know, third, fourth spot. Yeah,
it's definitely not salary.
Yeah.
Because I have known and I have coached people who have 3 or 4 jobs because their jobs are so easy. Full-time jobs, and they're just like, you know what, this is so easy, I can take another one on. Now clearly they're single and they don't have kids or anything, but I mean, AI is going to change things, and we need to use our EI, our emotional intelligence, as our edge in this and where we're going.
That's going to be like the superpower of the future.
I think that's our superpower of now. And honestly, even if we look back at businesses in the past, businesses that had leaders who showed great empathy or who had leaders who showed great resilience, those businesses thrived. You don't need to be driving people into the ground to get results anymore.
That's right.
I mean, it was never acceptable, but just now we're saying it's really not acceptable.
Yeah, that's so true. And how would you then define, for those who now heard in our current conversation the word emotional intelligence, maybe some have already heard it once or twice, but do not really know what's the definition of that word. So how would you define emotional intelligence, and what does it mean? And how does it relate to leadership and becoming a better leader?
Oh, yeah. How many hours do we have here? No, I'm just kidding. So if we talk about emotional intelligence, I want to say the easiest way to think about it is understanding your emotions and how they affect your decisions, and then also being able to understand other people's emotions. So the intelligence, if you will, is really around being able to understand what you're feeling and to be able to name it. I want to say, myself included, many of us are cut off from our emotions. We know the joy part of it. You know, we know when we're happy, and we might know that when we're sad or angry. But do we know what awe feels like in our body? Do we know what jealousy or resentment feels like in our body? Probably not. We just say, I don't feel good. Yeah. So really being smart, intelligent around what our emotions feel like in our body, what they're trying to tell us. Because what I did for a long time, especially in the abusive environments at work, is that I just pushed them down. And I used wine to feel good about the bad feelings, to take, quote unquote, the edge off. So I noticed I was starting to drink more wine, and I'm not really a drinker in general. And so what happens is when we push these feelings, these very real feelings down, they have to go somewhere. So sometimes they turn into sickness, sometimes they turn into different ailments, not necessarily disease, but different aches and pains. It can cause problems in other relationships. So the intelligence around emotions means they have something to tell us and we have something to learn. And when we listen, we make better decisions. When we make better decisions, we have different behaviors, and our behavior over time indicates our performance. And that also indicates the type of relationships we have. So the intelligence is the feeling intelligent, not just the cognitive.
And also to be always aware in the present moment, to know, okay, what's happening right now? Why am I starting to feel that my emotional state is changing? And to what direction is it changing? And to take action, and not to just to wait for days or weeks and then just start thinking about it, just to really be aware of it as it happens.
And that is the hard part, because that emotional hijack, if you will, some people have maybe read about it or heard about it. There's like, when you really get flushed with a deep, strong, big feel, it is very difficult to access your logical side. I did stand-up comedy and improv a while ago.
Wow.
And when I did that, the instructor, the first thing that he said was, you can't feel and think at the same time. You're either feeling or you're thinking. And we go back and forth between the two all day. And so to your point, that skill of being in the moment with that feeling and watching it and understanding, hey, I'm angry right now because I feel violated in my values, right? I'm being extremely disrespected. That happened to me the other day. I work on this all the time. And I went to a cafe, and customer service is a big value of mine. Yeah. When I go to a place and I pay $10 for a latte, I'd like a smile. I don't think that's too much to ask. And so I went to a place, and the manager, I really felt just violated that customer service value. And I noticed myself get so angry. I mean, Juan, I haven't been this angry for some time. And I just noticed it like well up really big. And because I have that space and that practice, I said, you know what, I think it's time for me to take my business to another place instead of what I really wanted to say. Yeah. And that's the key, is that when we're in a work environment, being intelligent with our emotions allows us to make better decisions, say less inflammatory things, create better environments, safer environments.
So true. And that's something that could happen at any point of time. So either if you're getting a latte, or if you are in a meeting with your employees and somebody just said something and you're like, oof, how do I now handle this as a manager, and not to start hurting more feelings, because it's just like that snowball effect. Because if somebody said this, then you're going to be putting your part on top of it, and then the snowball gets bigger, and then somebody else says something else, and it just gets more and more problematic, the whole situation. And it's really hard to stop that whole dynamic that just started building up in the meeting. And that's, I think, very, very powerful. If the manager can detect that early on in the meeting and can say, oh, there's something going on here. Maybe even it doesn't have to do with the manager himself or herself, but if they're just observing something going on between two team members, and if they really can see, okay, there is some tenseness going on there, and the feelings are not in tune as he's observing that. So I think that's another, again, either superpower that one can have.
That is a skill.
Yeah.
And so I call that reading an emotional temperature. Yeah. So when you can walk into a room, some people are really dull to it. I don't want to say dumb to it, because I think we can get sharper in the skill, but that itself is a skill that will set you far above any other organization or mental, like cognitive skill. Yeah. If you're able to walk into a room and read the emotional temperature of people within that environment, that means that you're not going to say things that inflame it. You might say things that break it down or give it more space. And so actually emotions run everything we do. We like to think, oh, it's our brain, it's our brain. Our brain is great for planning. Our brain is great for executive function, the front part. Yeah. But really, we're run by the emotions. If I walk a new room and I don't like somebody, my heartbeat might go up. And then they say that one thing. I knew that they were that way. And then we start making the story. Yeah. And that's why it's important for leaders to really always work with a coach so they can catch these stories. I also call it increasing your emotional bandwidth. Yeah. Right? And you and I have talked about that a lot too.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, how come these things are not taught to us when we are in school? Because it's so important as a human being. Yeah? So it doesn't really matter if you're a manager, if you're an employee, but just as any person out there running around this planet, it should be some standard that people should learn about emotions, learn about how to control them. And I was thinking, okay, if I'm doing so many hours when I was in school of chemistry and biology and all these different things, how come they don't teach us things like that? Which is really, I think it's very important.
I agree with you. And I think that while we don't have all the time, I think we could talk about this for a long time, but I think that's the job of parents in society, because we used to learn that, right? So when we were more together, when we had villages and we would learn, don't provoke this person, or so that human art, they create schools like adulting schools for this. Wow. People like myself who are doing this work. I don't work with kids, but people work in the social and emotional learning space, and we need this more than ever. Yeah. We have a loneliness epidemic, and the feeling of loneliness, they know from studies, is equivalent to the detriment of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Wow. So if you are every day feeling lonely, you might it's the equal damage on your body of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Wow. So if you're a leader showing up in a remote environment, think about it. You might have 15 people on your team feeling that. So that's why this work is important. Yeah. Because you're not just working with their brain, you're working with the whole person, That's
right. Wow, that's so powerful. And when you work with leaders, how can you make that sensitivity go up? How do you make them more emotionally intelligent and to understand their team members better?
Yeah, so this is interesting because if we just look at like preference of communication style, everyone has a slant. Some people just want to know information, and some people really care about the people. And some people have a mix of both. So really what we need to do is speak their language. So if I'm a person and I'm results driven, I care about the tasks, I care about just getting the task done, then we need to talk to that person in a way that says, hey, you want to get this task done, let's see how these people need so that you can get that task done. Whereas if we start saying, oh, so-and-so is sad about this or they're upset, that person doesn't care. Yeah. So we need to really understand that everybody has a different language in which they want to speak in. Yeah. And part of what I do is assessing the quote unquote language that you speak in, or your preference of communication. So then you can say, okay, I know that part of my team needs this. Maybe they're scientists and they need to know the whys to connect it to why is it important for me to quote unquote be nice, have empathy, right? So there's science behind empathy too. And there's science behind resilience. And that's what we're really working on studying now.
Wow, that's amazing. And if I'm thinking now, those managers who are listening to this podcast and they would like to put something concrete to try it out and put it into action, what would be one of those actionable steps or tasks that you could tell them to do at the end of this podcast and to see if they see any change?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of things I think people could do for free, which is really easy. One, there is a global survey called VIA survey, VIA survey.org, I believe. And you can go there and you can take it. It's free. I would say less than 10-minute survey, and it shows you your values. If you could do that for yourself and then the people on your team, and it doesn't matter if they're global, it's actually good because it's a globally validated tool, then you can understand, okay, I know that Juan values, let's say, leadership, but Diana values prudence. When we understand what people value, then we make decisions not to step on their values. Yeah. Then we make decisions to help them use their values in their work. And that's a very emotionally intelligent way to lift your people up without getting too much into talking about their feelings. Because we're not trying to be a therapist, right? That's not what we're doing. We're trying to get the best of them and understand who they are. So VIA survey is number one. And number two, a lot of companies use a DISC or MBTI, which is Myers-Briggs type indicator. So if you could really start to speak to people how they want to be spoken to, that also shows emotional intelligence. That shows that I'm being sensitive to Juan likes when I say bullet points. Diana does not like that. She needs to have a conversation around why the bullet points have feelings. That's okay too. So showing that flexibility shows your emotional intelligence.
Wow, that's so good. I'll be putting that into the show notes so that whoever would like to do those, they can just click on that and access those tests. And I will definitely be doing mine then tonight.
And it's so fun because you can see, for example, I did it with my husband, and my highest values are his lower values, and vice versa. So he balances me out. Yeah. And that way I know that when he's doing something that, for example, prudence is really high on his, not very high on mine, but I know when he's being prudent, it's because he's using his highest value. And instead of being annoyed about it, I go, oh, that's his way of like living within his values.
Yeah.
And I respect that because I respect him. So, when we understand that about people, that's where we can engage that empathy, resilience, inspiration, motivation.
Exactly. And I think that's really where you can start getting, as a leader, good results from your team. Because if I think about, let's say, a flower pot, if you have a very small flower pot and you put a plant inside, it can only grow to a certain dimension. And if you put it into a big flower pot, then it starts growing much, much bigger, this plant. So somehow I just take that one-to-one analogy and see it in the employees in the company. So either you're giving them more empowerment and more space to do their job and to be using their skills that they have and to make decisions, and also the room to grow. And they're going to be giving you then more in return from that space that you're giving them and from that nice environment that you're giving them. I would say if you look at it the other way around, that you're not giving them the space, you're not giving them the environment, you're not giving them all that room for improvement, then they're not going to grow within that organization. And can they say, okay, 4:00 is end of day, I'm just going to drop my pen and I'm going to go home, even if there's still work on the backlog somewhere, but I'm just doing what I came to do and the time is up, so I'm going to continue tomorrow. But if you put that same employee in another company who values their feelings and who are really nice to them and encouraging them to develop themselves, I'm sure when it's 4:00 and when there's still 2-3 emails to accomplish, they'll probably do it joyfully to say, hey, okay, I'm just going to finish these 2 emails, and even if I'm 20 minutes later at home, it's still going to be fine because my boss is going to be happy and we're going to get the job done for today. And that could be the same person, but in 2 different environments, and they just react differently in these 2 different environments. It's because maybe one, you got leaders with the skill set of emotional intelligence and really good leaders, and then on the other side you have the ones who do not have that, which say the opposite.
And it's so true. And I feel like in your analogy, the weeds, if you will, are the letting go and the not caring. So that's when you have weeds. But if you really work on honing your emotional intelligence, and so what I do is I measure 42 different behaviors. So we can pinpoint which behavior a person is showing where they're out of alignment with their environment, like you were talking about. So like a flower pot has an environment. Some plants can't be fully in the sun and some plants can. Yeah. Some need watering every day, some don't. So that's that, if you want to even call it like intelligence. Yeah. To know what the environment needs, and the leader's role is to be flexible in that environment. Working on your emotional intelligence, it allows you to be flexible, and it allows you to say like, oh, I have a sunflower here, but over here I have a tomato plant.
That's right. And that's, I think, probably some people even call it situational leadership, where they adapt themselves according to the person who's in front of them. And I could totally relate to that, what you just mentioned, because if I look back to the different teams I had, there was, for example, one person in my team who was a super top performer, and all I had to do is just twice a year sit together with this person and say, look, these are the goals for the next 6 months and this is what we would like to achieve. And then I just let the person do their thing. They just go out there, they do their projects, they do their planning, and they're so happy because they don't get me as their manager to be breathing down their neck every step of the way to tell them, look, now are you going to do this? Are you on time? Are you sure you're going to make it? And so forth. So I know that this person works best that way. If I just leave them alone, and they know if they do have a problem and they do need support from my side as their manager, then they will raise their hand and say, oh, I'm having an issue. Could you help me out, or could you give me advice? Then I will jump in and I will then work with them in that situation. But then I had other employees who are just the opposite. An employee who I noticed, I gave them first a free space, but then I felt that they were lost, that they were just every day coming into work and I'm thinking, oh, okay, what should I do today? Maybe I do this, maybe I do that. And then I knew that for this person, I needed to do a little bit more, I would say, coaching or my conversation.
Hand-holding.
Yeah, the hand-holding with them, just to see, okay, what's your task for this week? Yeah, how is it linked to your yearly goals and to our department goals? And what are your plans? Could you tell it to me? And we can review them for this week. And then like this, you know what you're going to do for next week. So this person then felt so happy that they knew, okay, my manager is really on top of things and they're really checking that I'm doing my work well and I know that I'm going the right direction. So that's really that situation leadership where you need to know who needs what and then just adapt your leadership style on those people.
I love that because there is a competency called situational awareness. That's one for sure. And then there's actually a model in emotional intelligence, which we won't go into the model, but 2 parts of what you were talking about. When we leave room for like lack of clarity, for example, which is what you said, giving that person clarity. In both situations, you gave them different types of clarity, right? One was maybe weekly and one was twice a year, right? And then the other one is autonomy, giving a person a right amount of autonomy. If we fail to do clarity and autonomy incorrectly, let's say, we leave space for a lot of unpleasant feelings. I'm annoyed, I'm angry, I feel lost, I'm confused, right? So we don't want to do that to our people. As a manager, we want to make sure that they are feeling those pleasant feelings, because pleasant feelings create engagement. Pleasant feelings create the type of worker that shows up and gives that extra mile, gives that extra work. So clarity and autonomy, you hit it right on the head. Yeah.
Or I would say most people would think, okay, I don't know about so many feelings out there. I only know I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry, and I'm feeling happy. And it's like, if you ask, let's say, my daughter at the moment, she is at the stage where she just says, oh, I'm okay. And then, okay, but, how was your day? How was school? Anything happened? How you're feeling? It's like, no, good. So I'm like, okay, so for her, it's either she's doing good, which means could be anything in the good scala, or she's saying she's not feeling good, and then, okay, it could be anything that is then on the other scala. And therefore, I would just want to hear from your side, like, what are all those different types of feelings that you could categorize in the positive range, like feeling good, joyful, bliss, love, excitement.
Oh, I love this. Oh, I like this. Keep going. All the good feelings.
Yeah. So maybe you could give us like an overview of how that spectrum could look like.
So your daughter, I think, exhibits what a lot of us in society tend to do, right? So we tend to either say like, oh, I feel good, or oh, I feel bad. So there are a couple of things here. We also know from studies that the more you are able to articulate and understand your feelings, the less incidence of mental health problems you will have. Which means, in normal language, if you're able to really understand what happy feels like in your body versus jealousy, versus resentment, versus pride, versus anger, when you're really able to name those feelings in your body, you are less likely to have anxiety or depression.
Wow.
That's what the studies tell us. So this is great news, because this is stuff that we can learn.
Yeah.
And we are facing a crisis in society where we have a lot of people who are lonely, who have depression, who have anxiety. And in order to help our people, ourselves, we can really get to know these. So you can Google emotions, you can Google feelings, and you know the words. Mm-hmm. That's the key, is that you already know the words. Yeah. So you go, oh yeah, this and that. And then if you really want to do this work a little bit more, you can work with a therapist, absolutely. You could work with a coach, but just like jotting down every day, if you're not necessarily feeling happy, what does serene feel like in your body? And there's a brilliant app called Mood Meter. I think it's $1. This is not a plug or a promotion, but Mood Meter, I have one called Dailyo that comes up on my phone, and a Mood Meter. And you can go on those apps and look at by color visually, but also by words. Wow. And say, today I'm feeling a little bit down. Yeah. What does down mean? So we look at the blue section. Wow. And we see down might be low energy, it might be tired, exhausted, fatigued. So I would say work on your emotional vocabulary, because that makes a difference in helping your daughter or our kids. All of our kids should be our daughters and our sons. Helping them really pinpoint it, because that will help them as they grow older. So
very good.
If you use 3 words, Juan, if you were to say, okay, out of these 3 words, which ones do you think you're feeling more so right now? And then have a chart of words. Yeah. That really helps our young people, because now they're not just feeling bad. Oh, I'm feeling disappointed because I didn't get a good grade on this test. We do this with people at our work too.
Okay.
They don't know what they're feeling either.
Yeah. So that's really the first step, to identify exactly what is it that I'm feeling, pinpointing it. And once you have it, then I think somehow you know it in your gut. Yeah, somehow you feel it like, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling. and then once you have that, and then comes the next, or at least for me, I'm not so sure what is your strategy, but for me, when I identified that, then I say, okay, what is now the root cause? What caused me to get exactly that feeling? And then I start thinking, what happened today? What was the next thing I did today? Okay, maybe it was that guy at the latte shop that got me really...
Oh yeah, I still kind trying to think about that. So I have to do a lot of like forgiveness. That's a me thing.
So
That's definitely
you
not
could
a
have
them
pulled out
thing.
the app at that moment and said, okay, here you go.
Yeah, I know. I feel like anger and rage.
Yeah.
And so when we feel a lot of those feelings really strongly, it's an indication of our values in some way, shape, or form. And I think you're right. Most people don't take it to the next step, which would be looking at the root cause and understanding that. And you can do that through writing in journals. You can do that through reflection in any way that makes sense for a person. Mindful meditation. Some people love that. Some people are not so. You can do it in yoga. You know, as you move in positions, memories will come up. You can use your body and your mind together. So there are a lot of ways that people can do that. They just have to find what works for them. But the key is they have to do it.
Yeah. And once they do that, and once they get to the root cause, then comes probably the third step, thinking, okay, now what's the solution? Now that I know what's the root cause, what are the next steps that I'm going to do to avoid getting, again, those negative emotions? And if it's positive emotions, what are the next steps I can do to maybe get it again? Yeah. I think that would probably like summarize at least what I try to do. It was just like intuitively that what I used to do in the past. Identify it, as you mentioned, then the root cause, and then to say, okay, what am I going to do now? What is my action plan? How am I going to either progress doing more of the things that make me feel good, or to eliminate those things that are making me feel bad?
So all feelings, I believe, are valid. So there's good anger. You want to be angry that rights are violated. You want to be angry that maybe sharks are getting killed for shark fin soup. You want to be angry about certain things. We don't want the destructive anger that might harm ourselves or others. So there's no good or bad emotions. And the other thing, Juan, is that we know just from global studies of emotions, different cultures have different emotions. And there have been decades of studies around this. We know that for the most part, people have happiness, sadness, anger, and fear, right? So we know that. But they can manifest in other ways that we may not have words for in this language. So we really have to find for ourselves what these words are. But I think the next level of that is non-judgment. Sometimes the action plan, I would say, is if we decide that we need to do something about it, but really the non-judgment is in the learning and the being and the, hey, I noticed in this situation I got angry. I wonder if that happens again. Will I get angry? So not judging ourselves, not judging our anger, but really listening to it. And that was my lesson.
Wow.
I really judged myself for being XYZ feelings. But the key is that that was actually giving me information that I was ignoring.
Yeah.
And that was the painful part.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thanks for explaining it that way, because it definitely brings more clarity. Yeah, because many people think, oh, I got to avoid getting angry, or I need to always feel happy and bubbly every single day. And that is putting, I think, maybe even some people under pressure, because then they even get sad on that day because they say, I'm not feeling happy today. What's wrong with me? So you got to really honor your feelings that you have and respect that.
Yeah. So we know from studies that 50% of your, let's say, temperament or your how you are in regards to happiness, that's going to be determined by your family. So let's say you come from a long line of depressed people, about 50% of that is in your genes. However, we also know genes can change. So 10% is your circumstance. So let's say if you're ultra wealthy to living on the streets, 10% is accounted for that, but 40% we have control over. So 40% we can cultivate the feelings in which we feel are beneficial to us.
Wow.
Right? So, and I'm not going to say positive or negative. Sometimes anger moves us. Anger is powerful, and it can be beautiful when used in the right way. Same with grief. We shouldn't say, oh, grief hurts. It hurts to feel this pain of loss, right? Or this joy of someone moving to the next moment in their non-life. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to wish any of it away. It's how we interpret it.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, it went a little spiritual there for a second, but in the end of the day, you know, we're spiritual beings. We're experiencing a human life. And so emotions are a big part of that, I believe. And I believe that because of what I've done to myself in avoiding the emotions, I've missed out on a lot of information that was crucial to my own happiness.
And that's something that is really important to see how each person processes those emotions. And as you said, it's important that it goes into words. And if they are maybe within trusted people, that they can explain what is it that's happening to them, how they felt about it, and how is it affecting them. So if just by putting it into words, I think that's already making people feeling already much better, and somehow you can process it much better than just swallowing it and just leaving it in there in that deep inside of you somewhere, and then it will express itself somewhere else, as you mentioned earlier today, that maybe it goes into an illness because you did not process it and you did not get out those emotions. And that's one of my next questions for you. How can it be that some people go through a certain situation, let's say it's at work, and the manager was not so delicate in giving a specific instruction to an employee, and the employee feels not so good about it? And one employee could maybe process it within 2-3 hours and say, okay, who cares? Life goes on, and I just thought about it. It was a silly situation, and I'm just going to continue with my work. All good. And another person might deal with it for weeks, to think about those words that the manager said. So what would you say is the differentiator? How can some people can just process it within hours, and another person really needs weeks to get over it? What is it that is different here?
That's a really good question. So what comes up for me when you're talking about that is mindset, right? So resilience and mindset, those are two things that come up. And I'll use myself as an example because I don't want to name anyone that I'm working with, but a younger me would say, hey, this person said something to me in a harsh way that hurt my feelings, and maybe not weeks to process, but creates resentment. Right? So I'm sitting in my resentment. So then every time they talk to me, that resentment is like re-earthed in my psyche, if you will. So then it turns into a wound after time, and then it gets worse. That's me not working on myself.
Oh, okay.
So that's me not understanding that that's resentment. That's me not understanding this person's way of speaking, their communication style. So as I work on myself, as I understand communication styles, I go, oh, so-and-so, number one, they're just not aware because they're using their own language. They're speaking from their own communication preference. So they're not aware that I have a different preference. So I need to preface it with that. But then secondly, let's say they say it in a sharp way. I take it less personally. So when I start to do this sort of work, I go, oh, even though that was not a great thing to say or how they said it, okay, that's how they speak. And they're unaware that other people have. So now I can start to see this person probably needs coaching. So this person probably, and if it happens enough and people complain about this person enough, then they'll probably need coaching around their awareness. But for a person receiving that, it's how the story they're making of it. Yeah. Right? So it's the story that they're saying, they spoke to me like that, so they must not like me. And then I'm not good at my job anyways. So it's that spiral. I love that you said this because I feel like if it takes you 2 weeks to get over something, hire a coach. Yeah. Work with a professional who will help you get out of your head. Or maybe if you have a therapist, a really good therapist, work with your therapist on this. If you have a shaman, absolutely work with a shaman. But start to grow yourself. And then you'll start to see that things are not always what they appear.
And that's where you really optimize your inner voice. Yeah, and you start making your inner voice help you in your journey of life and not making your inner voice, making your life harder than it already should be.
Yeah, and also believing the stories. We shouldn't believe everything that we hear in our mind. Yeah. Because it's not always correct. And a lot of the times what I work with people is that they've changed a lot, but their narrative stays the same. For example, I worked with a CEO who said, I'm a people pleaser. I'm a people pleaser. And I was like, but is that true? Are you really a people pleaser? And then we poked at it. We, picked it apart. Yeah. And he was like, actually, I'm not. And I don't know why I keep saying that I'm a people pleaser. I was like, well, what would you say instead? You say, I am actually really fair and I hear both sides of a story before I make a decision. So we stopped identifying as this person and we started listening to the true story in the evolution of the person.
Wow, that's very, very interesting because to change the narrative that goes on in your head, first of all, you need to be also again aware. So awareness is so powerful and be aware, what is my narrative here? What am I saying to myself every day when I look at myself in the mirror or when I go through my day? And even though that narrative is not true anymore, how do you actually then realize that that narrative actually does not reflect the reality?
And that's why I think it's important for all leaders as you're managing people, and whether you're a first day manager or you've been managing for 10 years, 15 years, get a coach. Yeah. Because even working with a coach for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, that will change your narrative. You show up better for yourself and you show up better for others.
Fantastic.
And that's the key to real leadership.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Diana, now one of my final questions, which is, what are the services that you offer to your clients?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for asking. I think you hit it on the head. It starts with awareness. So when I work with somebody, we start with awareness. We do a 360 assessment of the people around them and what emotional intelligence are they showing in their environment. We can look at 42 different behaviors. We look at how they communicate, and we look at their strengths. So we want to start from a place of alignment instead of trying to fit them into a box. We want everyone to be authentic and true to themselves, because that's when we thrive. So that's what I do. I help people. We start with the assessment, and then once we know where your strengths are, we go into coaching, and then we take it from there. So that's what I do.
Spectacular. That's a real cool job.
Do you know, it's an honor to do this role and work with people, because I go into such intimate parts of their life, and they feel safe enough to work with me. And I really find that this is society changing work. Yeah. It's a real honor to do. Yeah. Thank you.
And to provide people that safe space, that's so powerful.
Yeah. It is.
And where can my listeners find you?
So I think the easiest place to find me is LinkedIn. So I'm Diana E. Lowe. So Diana E. Lowe. And because somebody already took Diana Lowe, which shucks. But then also they can email me at hello@bluelightleadership.com.
Fantastic. I'll be putting that also into the show notes so that it makes it easy for those who cannot take notes at the moment. And wow, that was a really nice conversation we had, Diana. Thank you so much for answering all these questions in such a beautiful way. And it really gave me more insight and ideas of what I can do with my thoughts in the future.
Oh, good. I feel like every time I have a conversation, either with yourself and just in general about this, I feel like I grow. I feel like I challenge myself. I feel like I go, you know what, I could do this better. And I think that's really what will contribute to great leadership. Yeah. Really challenging ourselves and our beliefs and just going that little bit further. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. Take care and see you perhaps soon again in another episode.
I hope so. Thank you, Juan. Bye.
Bye-bye. What a fantastic conversation with Diana. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. In the show notes, you will find all the links on where to find her company and her services. As mentioned in the introduction, one of the main factors that have propelled my rapid development and success in the corporate world was the ability to develop my emotional intelligence muscle. I was more in tune with my feelings, with the feelings of my team members, and the level of happiness coming from our internal and external customers. The story we heard from Diana's negative experience with her managers is a story we often hear from employees in the business world. I'm confident that we would have more thriving businesses out there if people who are in the leadership roles focus on improving their emotional intelligence. At the end of the day, we are all in the people business. I hope you found this episode valuable. Please rate, subscribe, and send in your comments and share with those who you think could profit from this episode. It's very much appreciated, and I'm grateful for your messages. I am also a work in progress and strive to do things better every day. This podcast was sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, where we believe that investing in yourself and in your employees is the best investment. Therefore, if you are interested in finding out more about courses and certification programs that were designed for you as a manager to further boost your business excellence initiative, then please go to the Courses for Managers tab in the company website www.wave-bef.com. where we have interesting courses for you as a leader. On the other hand, if you want to further develop your team members and your high performers so they can bring even more value by learning new skills and methods for solving process issues, then please select Courses for Employees tab on our website. Here you will find courses designed for your employees. In case you already have team members who are certified in any Lean Six Sigma level, then we also have extra courses for them as well. Thank you, stay tuned, and see you in the next episode of Business Excellence for Managers.